All right, we're going to get started this evening. We're going to open with public comment. Before we get started, just a quick statement. The school board encourages community input. While comments and questions are welcome, the law prohibits the board from discussing concerns about individual employees or students in a public meeting. The board will not deliberate, discuss, or engage in conversation with speakers. However, the board may ask administration to review the concerns presented. Speakers must present their testimony in a respectful manner. Vulgarity, character attacks, malice, or specific complaints identifying staff or students by name or implication will not be permitted. We will stop the proceedings immediately if employee or student privacy issues are raised and direct the speaker to forward comments regarding the individual employees or students to the superintendent. All right. Our first speaker tonight is Bill English.
Right here. Yep, right next, next to Dr. Cherry.
Start. Good evening, Board of Directors. Again, my name is Bill English. I am founder of the Northside George Job Creation Team and should now be a familiar face to you since this is the third time I've been here. I've sent you an email this week dealing with my concerns since I couldn't get all of them in the 3-minute window the last time. I'm well aware that time is passing again, so let's get to it. You have a black immigrant-owned naturalized citizen bus transportation company, MTN, that has been woefully mistreated. Your transportation consultant, CISO, holds all of the cards. They plan the routes without input from MTN. They have created long routes that have required MTN drivers to work double or triple shifts to get them done. And then the school district hits MTN with $500,000 in fines for being late. MTN works for lots of large school districts in the metro area, and I can tell you this is not standard practice. Finding a bus company for being late for routes they can't control in the midst of a national bus driver shortage is unprecedented. At the beginning of the school year, CISO took many of the shorter and more profitable routes and reassigned them to another bus company within CISO, which CISO has family ties. Why is your consultant doing everything they can to put a small company out of business? Why are they designing routes that they know no bus company could service? And why did they take the easy and profitable routes and reassign them to another bus company? I think it is well past time that this board demand that your district audit CISO's practice. Are they following your conflict of interest policies? Are they penalizing other vendors or just MTN? Someone needs to get to the bottom of this, and I am truly asking you to help. Finally, I've spoken here 3 times without any apparent action or response. The information we requested previously and today are subject to state laws requiring public jurisdictions to make transparent their policies and practice. That remains one of our options. We choose to partner with you and to not take adversarial action or even ask for information the public should have under the Freedom of Information Act. Please make the Stillwater public and their parents aware of the concerns raised here tonight. I beg that of you, and may God bless you, and thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak. I hope it's my last time of having to appear before you.
The next speaker is Luke Huntley. Is Luke Huntley here? Last call for Luke Huntley. Okay. On behalf of the board, I would like to thank tonight's speaker for sharing their perspectives and opinions with the board. We will direct the administration to verify information presented and respond at a future meeting when if a follow-up is warranted. However, as a general rule, we cannot comment on any active litigation. The public comment period is now closed. I am calling this meeting to order. Joan, please take the roll call.
Director Hackert,
Here.
Director Kelsenberg,
Here.
Director Petrie,
Here.
Director Porbenny,
Yep.
Director Riley,
Here.
Director Fatava, Chair Sherman.
Here.
Form.
All right. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item of business is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Great. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Director Hockert, there's a first and a second. All those in favor of approving tonight's agenda, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next, which is our student report. Ella?
I have the academic report, and this week was Blast Week at the high school, and students went to a bunch of different events like a heritage fashion show, presentations in the auditorium by Abdulaziz Mohammed, LGBTQ panel, a student-teacher basketball game, and then later this week we have a Black student panel, Asian student panel, and a culture fair. And it was the first week of the new flex schedule, and I think a lot of students really liked the early release and opportunity to make up work afterwards. And the Trust Club had their state basketball tournament, and they won first place. And the Bella Choir had their treble fest today, where they worked with the middle schoolers to improve singing and the younger kids and help them out.
Great.
Okay. I had the sports portion. The girls' alpine ski team took second at state yesterday. They had 3 skiers, all state honors: Macy Neubauer, Gracie Geyer, and CJ Fredkove. The gymnastics team will be competing at the state meet tomorrow. Today, our boys and girls Nordic ski teams compete in the second day of the state meet. The girls' hockey team lost a heartbreaking 4-3 to Hill Murray. They end their season as conference champs. Our dance team had their best finish at sections in the last 15 years, but it wasn't enough to overcome Mountains View. The conference champion wrestling team will compete in the team portion of the state meet on Saturday at the high school. Girls basketball continues to lead the conference and hosts second place against East Ridge on Friday. And then boys basketball lost a close one to Mountains View on Tuesday and plays East Ridge tonight. The boys swim and dive team finished second in the conference and will compete at East Ridge in the JV championship on Saturday. Boys hockey travels to Holly Family tonight to close out their regular season, and then sections start next Saturday. And our adapted floor hockey team won an exciting 8-7 overtime game against South Washington County this week, and they will host New Prague next week. And then, like Ella said, we had a student-teacher basketball game where the teachers won 69-51.
That's great. Thank you, ladies. That was great.
Did you say 69-1?
51.
Oh,
Not that
I'm sorry.
bad. Come on. You can't even score one in
Take
basketball.
back my laugh, okay.
Great. Okay, and I'd like to recognize Superintendent Lansfeld for her report.
Okay, thank you, Chair Sherman and fellow directors. It's been a very busy time in our district, and we have a lot of information to share and many things to celebrate. The National School Counseling Week was celebrated last week, February 7th through 11th, and focused on public attention on the contribution of school counselors within the U.S. school system. And please join me in recognizing the unique work that school counselors, social workers, and student advocates within our school systems do at every grade level to help children reach their full potential. They support our students academically, socially, and emotionally, and can help them with anything from peer relationships to planning for college or career and everything in between. Beginning this past Monday, February 14th, face coverings are now strongly recommended but no longer required. for students, staff, and visitors in our schools. The CDC still requires face coverings to be worn on school buses. The positive COVID rates continue to go down in the district with 42 positive cases this week, and I believe last week it was somewhere in the 70s. Director Pete Kelsenberg promised the Stillwater Area High School Unified Basketball Team that we would let our community know that our team won the tournament today, and I believe you were driving the bus for them. Congratulations to the team. And the Polar Plunge is coming to Stillwater. I will be signing up with my penguin costume. We have just gotten a full approval to bring the mobile unit Polar Plunge to Stillwater Area High School on Monday, March 28th. Special Olympics Minnesota will be bringing the Polar Plunge to our ponies. Be on the lookout for a dance-off from Snowflake, the polar bear, and Polar Plunge, our Polar Plunge mascot, and one of our only Stillwater pony mascots to dare to participate. We'll see how that goes. Fundraising from this event will go towards Special Olympics and our Ponies Trust Club, which supports and encourages inclusion in our schools and in our community. This Saturday, the Minnesota All-State High School Band and Orchestra will be performing at Orchestra Hall in Minneapolis. It is a huge honor and accomplishment to be an all-state musician as students audition for these spots and are selected from high schoolers across the state. I was able to attend with Chair Sherman a concert. It was a music festival for our band, orchestra, and choir students at Cretin-Durham Hall about a week ago, and it gave me goosebumps. We have some very talented students. Congratulations again to our Stillwater FFA. They were claiming first place in 3 recent regional career development event competitions. And we held a district legislative platform this past month to share our district's legislative priorities. And a big thank you for attending goes out to Representative Stephen Sendall, Senator Karen Housley, Representative Tony Jurgens, Representative Amy Wozlowick, Senator Susan Kent, Representative Bob Detmer, and Representative Shelley Christensen. We had a robust discussion and really appreciate their time and input and support. I'm really excited to report that we have another responsive classroom certified teacher, Darla Simonet. Darla is a second grade teacher at Lake Elmo Elementary School. She has been invited to become a national RC presenter. She serves on our district QComp committee and is one of our teachers taking the LETRS professional development training. This makes 5 national presenters and 5 additional certified classroom teachers in our district, and that is a wonderful resource and support for our students. Our Stillwater alumni are going for the Olympic gold right now. 2 Stillwater Area High School graduates are participating in the Beijing Winter Olympics. Jessie Diggins, class of 2020, she's earned a bronze medal in the women's freestyle sprint, the first individual Olympic medal for an American woman in cross-country skiing. This is Diggins' 3rd appearance in the Olympics and her 2nd medal. And we have Noah Cates, class of 2017, making his first appearance in the Olympics as part of the U.S. men's hockey team. He scored a goal to help lead his team to victory over China on this past Thursday. We also have an alum that is competing at the Paralympics, Sydney Peterson, class of 2020. Will be competing in the 2022 Winter Paralympics as part of the U.S. Nordic ski team. Peterson won 3 medals in women's standing competition at the recent Lillehammer 2021 Paris Snow Sports World Championships. Wow. This is neat. 2 of our Stillwater students won the Congressional App Challenge. Kuljes, and I hope I'm pronouncing the name right, Singhvi and Riddhi Singhvi have been named winners of the 2021 Congressional App Challenge, the most prestigious prize in student computer science. More than 2,100 apps were submitted in the competition sponsored by U.S. representatives, and just 340 were chosen. The students developed an app that predicts type 2 diabetes with 98% accuracy, higher than the 85% accuracy in published medical work. A group of 7th and 8th grade special ed students and their general ed peers at Oakland Middle School worked together to imagine, design, and build an interactive model of what an inclusive and adaptive amusement park could look like. They used reclaimed materials to build the model, which features twinkling lights, flowers, several colorful fairies, and much, much more. The students had hoped to showcase their park idea during Da Vinci Fest, but when that was canceled, the students held an open house instead, and it was well attended. Stillwater Area High School is part of the Unified Inclusion Movement here in Minnesota and is a unified champion school. They achieved this honor through implementing Unified Phi Ed along with our Ponies Trust Club. Trust is an acronym for True Respect Unifies Students Together. Two members of the club, Rylin Zenon and Audrey Coleman, along with their teacher, Paula Harrison, had the opportunity to participate in Capitol Hill Day. This is an event where Special Olympics shares the need to continue receiving funds from the federal government that support these programs with members of Congress. A community conversation to help us continue to create safe, welcoming schools will be held via Zoom on February 28th from 6 to 7 p.m. We'll be sharing information about emergency protocols, common language, roles and expectations, and we will have a small group discussion and idea sharing. We really hope that this is a great turnout, and our local authorities and Lindsay Paradise, our SRO officer, have been assisting us with this. And incoming kindergarten orientation is coming on February 28th. Kindergarten orientation will be held for, and I want you to hear this, an estimated 771 projected incoming kindergarten students. That is a really big group of students. I'm thinking it might be because of the pandemic last year, so we are hopefully going to be receiving a lot of 5-year-olds. Incoming kindergartners are invited to attend at all of our elementary schools from 4 to 5 p.m. And our current kindergarten students, please note on the calendar, there is a change for February 18th. This will be a regular school day for current K students, and orientation was moved to an evening event on February 28th due to the COVID safety concerns. And finally, I was able to attend the student-led Conference for Change at Stillwater Area High School today. A big shout out to Cornelius Risch, our cultural liaison, and many other staff members for their leadership in facilitating this event. Principal said students stated this afternoon that this was the best day of school they have had all year. They left feeling heard, connected to a great purpose, and committed to making our schools better for all students. And with that, that is my report. I'm sorry it was so long, but we do have a lot to celebrate in Stillwater.
Yes, we do. That was amazing. Thank you. My report's a lot less eventful than that. I just want to let the board and the community know that Director Vodova is out of the country traveling for the next few weeks, so she'll miss the next couple board meetings. So, all right, moving on to the consent agenda. All right, the consent agenda is made up of the following items. Item A, minutes of February 3rd, 2022 closed session, minutes of the February 3rd, 2022 business meeting. Item C, payment of invoices, February 5th, 2022 through February 18th, 2022. Item D, the treasurer's report, December 2021. Item E, Oakland Middle School pool tile and athletic locker replacement. And item F, human resources personnel report. Can I get a motion to approve?
I would like to pull.
What would you like to pull?
I'd like to pull C, payment of invoices, please.
Is there a motion to approve items A, B, D, E, and F?
So moved.
So moved. And second?
Second.
Director Riley with the first and Bev with the second. Okay. All right. We will move on to item C. Is there a motion?
Do you need to, did you want to
Oh,
take a vote?
I'm sorry, we need to vote, yes. So we have the first and the second. Can we vote to approve items A, B, D, E, and F? All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great. Okay, so we have pulled item C. We are now treating it as, this is a separate item of business. So we need a motion to begin discussion. Director Riley, do you have a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to discuss C. This is a first.
Yeah, we attended, and I should,
I watched.
we should point this out. We're trying to follow Robert's rules a little bit better, and we're doing our training. So we need a motion to either accept or reject, and then we can have a discussion. So it's treated just like any regular business. Do you have a motion that you would like to make? Or does
I
it-
made it.
Okay. Is there a second to discuss item C? Okay. Okay. All those in favor of, well, I guess we can have a discussion now. Okay, go ahead. So we can discuss item C.
Thank you, but this process is really confusing to me because our policy states that I have the right to pull anything off of the consent agenda.
Which you do.
To discuss.
Which
To
you do.
discuss And ask questions, but if you don't.
But you make the
second-
motion.
But if you don't second it, I don't have the right to
Right.
discuss it. So this is in conflict.
So
Your
then
new-
you would,
Your new procedure, please.
Director Riley, I'm trying to explain to you about what we discussed at a training session, which you did not attend. Can you please let me
You're
speak?
not supposed to interrupt me while I'm speaking. You're
Director Riley.
According to the meeting that you are describing, you are not supposed to interrupt me
we
while
have a
I'm trying to
discussion?
explain my point.
Do we have a discussion?
Can you answer my question? As far as this goes, this new procedure that you are doing is in conflict with the policy that we have in place that says a
We will
board
take,
member.
I will take that under advisement. We are following Robert's rules.
This
That is
isn't-
in our policy.
This is in conflict with your policy, then change the policy before you implement new
Director
procedures.
Riley, would you like to discuss
I
item
will
C?
discuss this, but I want
Go
this
ahead and
addressed.
discuss item C.
You are the
Go
one
ahead
that-
and discuss item
one
C.
that is not following Robert's rules, by the way. So item C, I had pulled out several POs for discussion today. PO number, and I will start with PO number 353606. And in that PO was for Freedom on My Mind, A History of African-American Books, Stamped Racism, Anti-Racism, and U-Books included the attachment quotes, and it was for a total of $4,580.40. I asked for, in this request, I asked for the syllabus, and I asked for which class and which grade this is for, and I received that information today. I received the POs the day following my request. This is my concern with these items on the disbursement and paying these bills, is that we have statutes in place. And statute number 123B.09, Boards of Independent School Districts, subdivision 8, duties. The board must superintend and manage the schools of the district, adopt rules for their organization, government, and instruction, keep registers, and prescribe textbooks and courses of study. That's just part of the statute. And if we go down to 123B.41, definitions, subdivision 2, textbook. A textbook means any book or book substitute, including electronic books, as well as other printed materials delivered electronically, which a pupil uses as a text or text substitute in a particular class or program in the school regularly attended, and a copy of which is expected to be available for the individual use of each pupil in this class or program. Textbook includes an online book with an annual subscription cost. Textbook includes teacher's edition, teacher's guide, other materials that accompany, and that goes on. And then we go down to,
Madam Chair, point of order.
this
Would you like
is,
to explain?
This is, we are dealing right now with whether or not we pay our bills. What Director Riley seems to be referring to is the process that the board has in terms of overseeing how books are chosen and paid for. But this essentially just has to do with paying the bills. And it's already been purchased, and so now it's just a matter of, do we pay our bills or do we not pay our bills? So it doesn't really have anything to do with, the oversight of curriculum.
Director Riley, just a couple different questions before I make my determination on the point of order. So Did you let staff know that you were going to be bringing this up? Because I did get your questions related to these, but it didn't reference anything like this, so that staff could come prepared to
Staff is-
speak.
Yes, I asked for all these materials.
Okay. Did you share these statutes with them, or?
So I'm supposed to,
Director Riley,
Free-
I'm just asking you questions.
trying to answer your question.
Did
So
did you talk to staff in advance of bringing it up, yes or no?
So you wanted me to pre-deliver my question
Director
to
Riley-
staff?
Yes,
Staff.
for a business meeting, yes, I do. That's the,
This is staff's, they should be well rehearsed in this already. Why would I submit a list of questions to have discussion on a public board meeting?
because you have you don't have the understanding or the background.
Excuse me?
So did they have,
Excuse me.
Based on the
This is a point of
materials-
order.
Director Riley, I'm trying to help here. Because what I'm trying to say, there's a motion on the floor. We have a consent agenda to pull.
My goodness.
You didn't let me know in advance you were pulling disbursements. That's part of our, you
I'm
should
allowed
be
to
letting
by
us know.
policy.
But you need to let your fellow board know what this isn't a
Community-
gotcha game.
Oh, my goodness, community. This
Isn't-
is
Director
not
Riley?
a gotcha. I am trying to establish the fact that this school district and this staff is not following statute and is supposed to come before the board to get approval before they purchase, before this gets put onto the disbursements as something that's already been done.
Director
And then we
Riley.
have to pay a bill. Please do not interrupt me, Chair. Let
I'm
me
making my
finish
ruling on the determination, and this is not germane to the motion.
It
We
is
have-
germane
no,
to the
We have a
motion.
consent item agenda. We are either approving our invoices or not approving our invoices.
So let me ask you this question, Chair. When we don't have accountability in this room, this board has oversight over the
Director
administrative
Riley,
actions of this.
you have been ruled out of order. You
When-
have been ruled out of order. We are paying the bill. This is a motion to approve
I am not
payment
out
of
of
invoices.
order.
Are you suggesting we did not receive services? Did we not receive services?
This has been
Did we
very-
not receive services? Our policy,
Our policy is that this material comes to the board before it's purchased, so there can be community involvement and
So,
input in these purchases.
I have given-
They did not come to
Right.
the board for these things.
Director Riley?
Now we come to,
Director Riley, would you like to have a learning session on curriculum?
Why would I
how we
need a
do
learning
curriculum,
session?
And how in our policy, how staff
How about
selects
staff
curriculum?
learns how to follow statute and so
Do
does the
you
board
want
chair?
that, is there desire on the board to have that? That's what we
My
can do.
desire is that we follow the law.
Okay.
The law.
Would you like to call?
Can I just make one
Yes.
small point about policy? And then, yes, we can move forward. The statute that you are referencing is in one of our policies, and we have recently, I don't remember exactly which one it is, but we have recently reapproved this. And according to the statute itself, and I remember calling MSBA on this and looking into it, because it does say that we are supposed to oversee it. But in doing so, we are, as a board, we are overseeing our superintendent, and that it is her job to manage the resources that are used in this district. So we oversee her through, and then she manages our district. That's how the law is intended, because none of us hold a superintendent's license, and you need to have a superintendent's license in order to superintend a district. So,
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain how that has to do with following the fact that this is supposed to come to the board for approvals of textbooks, which this is a textbook, beforehand?
I think the questions that you have do go back to our policies on curriculum, which we have not come up for review yet, but they're important
They're in place.
yes, they are.
They are in place, and we are not following them. And this isn't the first time I've asked this question. And my concern is that if there is no accountability by the board, then when does it get fixed? When do we follow the law?
Superintendent Lansfeld?
Yes, Chair Sherman, Board Directors, we would be happy to provide a work session or learning session on curriculum adoption and the process, if you would be open to that at a future date, so everybody has a consistent and thorough understanding of the process.
Is there interest in reviewing our policies related to curriculum and instructional practices by the board? Yes.
Can I just interject?
Yes.
So As you recall, as a board, one of your goals this year is to review the 600 series policies that are related to instructional resources, curriculum, instructional practices. That is coming to the board this spring. Currently, our World's Best Workforce Advisory Committee has been reviewing the 600 series policies that are directly related to this. And I think, Director Riley, what you're saying right now is relevant to Policy 603. What we currently have in place in policy in this district is that it is the professional licensed educator that chooses the materials that are used in classrooms. And so at this time, I do believe we are following our district policy, but that is something that is currently under review. And we have a plan to bring that forward with updates for the board to consider this spring.
Which is a textbook, which comes before the board. The board approves textbooks. None of this came forward. When was it presented to the board?
Policy 603 is the one that you're referencing, and in that policy, it does indicate that textbooks, instructional resources are selected by the licensed instructors, educators.
And state statute trumps policy, and state statute says that the school board is the overseer of textbooks. None of this came to the board.
Director Hocker?
I'd like to call the question.
Okay. And the question, I guess, was just to discuss. So, sorry, I didn't even think about that. The question was to discuss. So are we ending discussion, I guess is more appropriate. So I will go back to what the motion was on consent, which was to either approve to pay our bills or to not pay our bills. So is there a motion on item C to pay invoices?
I move that we pay our invoices.
Okay. Is there a second? Thank you. Okay, all those in favor of approving item C and paying our invoices, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. Motion carries. And it is in policy, and I want to make sure, Director Riley, I want to be able to, and the staff wants to be able to get you what you need. So if we could just communicate, know in advance, it would be helpful to facilitate the business meeting.
My reaching out is knowing in advance. That is me telling them I'm looking for these. I don't have to give them a list of questions.
Right. Before you're bringing them up at a board meeting, it would be a professional courtesy, and it is in our policy to let staff know, so they can come with the information to address your questions. It's really unfair to not be able to let them prepare to answer your question properly.
I did give them the heads up. I was pulling all of these, which I haven't even been able to discuss the rest of them on this list, so.
Right. That's another issue.
So you probably might need to define exactly, now let's lay it out, exactly the steps and words that board members must abide by. Okay,
Director Riley, you are one member of this board,
right?
and it's the board's will that drives the work of our staff, not one board member. It is the work of the 7 voices at this table that drives our work of our staff, not the voice of one.
I'm confused. Can you please explain what that means?
We're moving on. Please follow policy and just give the staff the
I do
courtesy
follow
of what the
policy.
questions
I did.
are.
I did follow
You did not.
policy.
Action items, telecommunications, action item A, and internet access cluster authorization resolution. John Perry.
Good evening, Board. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm bringing forward a resolution that I'm requesting approval on that would authorize our district to join the 916 Telecommunications Access Cluster. The state of Minnesota provides equity aid for telecommunications services, specifically not telephone, but internet-related services. They've been doing this since 2006. The equity aid covers half of what is not covered by our E-rate dollars. So in order to get internet to all of our school sites, costs the district about $200,000 a year. E-rate covers $80,000 of that. So the remaining $120,000 is covered by equity aid at a rate of 50%. So it's worth about $60,000. As the district is a founding member of the TIES organization, TIES was always our telecommunications cluster. Part of the Minnesota Telecommunications Internet Access Equity Aid Program is that you must be part of a cluster in order to file. So I believe the state did this in order to create efficiencies so that districts would be working together on internet access and reducing the amount of paperwork that has to be filed. When TIES was absorbed by Sourcewell, Sourcewell continued to file our paperwork for us under that JPA. And at this point, Sourcewell has informed districts that they will no longer be filing equity aid on behalf of the districts. Since the district is already a member of 916, I reached out and talked to 916. They already perform this service for a number of 916 members. So by passing the resolution that's included in the packet, we would be allowed to join that cluster and they would file our equity aid paperwork for us. There is no cost to the district. There's nothing else really that goes into it, but the board has to approve our joining the telecom cluster, and then 916 will be able to file for our reimbursements, and then we'll receive those from the state. So I'm here tonight to ask you to approve the resolution authorizing Intermediate District 916 to apply for federal E-rate discounts and telecommunications internet access equity aid on behalf of our district.
Is there a motion?
Sure.
Pete?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Director Helsenberg, okay. So there's a motion to approve, to accept administration's recommendation. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Director Petrie, and now discussion. Questions? Seeing none? Okay, all those in favor of approving?
I think I have to make the,
Oh, do you need, you're ready to read it? Okay, thank you.
Director Hawker,
Yes?
Director Kelsenberg,
Yes.
Director Porbeni.
Yeah.
Director Riley,
Yes.
Director Sherman,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Director Petrie,
Yes.
and Chair Sherman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great.
Thank you, board.
We're moving on to reports. Item A is School Board Recognition Week. Superintendent Melinda Lansfeld.
Okay, thank you, Chair Sherman and Board Directors. The 2022 Minnesota School Board Recognition Week is scheduled for next week, February 21st through 25th, 2022. Each February, the Minnesota School Board Association sponsors Minnesota School Board Recognition Week to recognize school board members for their commitment to Minnesota's public school students. And I would like to, after the meeting, we have certificates of appreciation for all of our school board members, including our student reps that we would like to pass out. And I have a school board recognition proclamation that I would like to read. Whereas Stillwater Area Public Schools recognizes the importance of public education in our community, and whereas Stillwater Area Public Schools appreciates the vital role played by those individuals who, as local school board members, establish policies to ensure an efficient, effective school system, and whereas school board members serve as a voice that enables our community to preserve local management and control of our public schools. And whereas school board members are charged with representing our local education interests to state and federal governments and ensuring compliance with state and federal laws. And whereas school board members selflessly devote their knowledge, time, and talents as advocates for our school children. Whereas local school board members are strong advocates for public education and responsible for communicating the needs of the school district to the public and the public's expectations to the district. Now therefore be it resolved that Stillwater Area Public Schools recognizes and salutes the members of the Stillwater School Board by proclaiming February 21st through 25th, 2022 as School Board Recognition Week. And with that, just want to thank each and every one of you for everything that you do for our students, our staff, our families, our schools, and our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, we're going to move on to the NAPAC report with Eric Anderson and James Tom.
Board Chair Sherman and members of our Board of Education, Eric Anderson here. It's good to be up here with you. I support our district's American Indian programming, which is directed and led by our district's Native American Parent Advisory Committee, which we refer to as NAPAC, and our Native American Student Alliance, which we refer to as NASA. We are fortunate tonight to have representatives from both leadership groups here with us tonight, including James Tom, the chair of our Native American Parent Advisory Committee, and our media specialists. Stillwater Area Public Schools receives American Indian Aid funding from the Minnesota Department of Education for 5 primary purposes: to support academic achievement and post-secondary preparation, to provide curriculum relevant to the needs, interests, and cultural heritage of American Indian students, to provide positive reinforcement of the cultural identity of our American Indian students, to increase awareness of American Indian culture among students, parents, and staff, and finally, to supplement state and federal educational and co-curricular programming. NAPAC and NASA work closely together to develop, implement, and participate in this important work. And now it's movie time. We're going to show you 2 brief videos created by these 2 leadership groups to provide you insight into their efforts. And we'll start with NAPAC, our Native American Parent Advisory Committee.
So my husband Michael and I started working with the Native American Parent Committee because we have 2 Native grandchildren. When we first started with NAPAC, our idea was that we just wanted to have Native people come in and teach us. As the teachers at schools heard about us and what we were doing, they wanted us to start bringing people to them. We could reach a lot of children that way.
A lot of books still have us portrayed living in teepees and riding horses. That's not true. So it's always good for some elder or another Native person to come in and talk to students. Fortunately, a lot of the Native people or elders are getting older, and it's hard for them to be getting into a school situation. So we are putting together educational trunks.
They have inventories and there's different themes, and we're collecting all the artifacts so that they can teach authentic lessons.
I was working on the contemporary issues bin. That's a bin that we have. Eventually there'll be a lot of videos in there, but we have education on what's going on in the 1920s to today in Native culture.
My trunk was garden, tools, seeds, maple syrup, because that was the food, wild rice, that was the food, and then we have some medicine plants in there too.
The buffalo is very significant to the Dakota and Lakota people. It's good to show the students that tangible kind of evidence of, first of all, how large they were. It's hard to imagine how big they were, so actually seeing the skulls, seeing how big the hide is, how many people can sit on the hide, that sort of thing. I really hope that teachers are able to use the trunks to get students excited about things. It's a lot different, like smelling a buffalo horn, than it is just seeing a picture in a slideshow or in a book.
I think we all collectively decided that we hope that there is kind of a continuation of education of Native American culture in the classroom, rather than kind of the past and, you know, the stuff that everybody learns about. We want to kind of be able to branch out and have kids learn about different things that they don't maybe always see or have the opportunity to learn about.
At Stillwater High School, I am the advisor for the Native American Student Alliance, which we call NASA, and it's a very informal group of students who self-identify as Native American, and also students who are interested in learning more about what it means to be Native American and developing that identity.
I congratulate all these graduates who are here for our very first graduation ceremony from NAPAC. We've been talking about this for a really long time, and it's just so wonderful to see it all come together. I know all of the students worked really hard. Again, congratulations to all our graduates.
I hope that it helps to curb racism in the community. Even though it has, there's a lot of work to be done.
I would really like to see a continuation of the expansion into the educational programs. That's something that I really much looked up to when I saw Denise taking all this effort to introduce authentic Native American education into to elementary schools.
On top of it, I hope that we do succeed and still continue to make sure that Native people in general, we have a 100% graduation rate, not just 95%. I think that's a big goal the group should work towards.
What we are doing in the schools is making sure that the students that we teach are taught authentic Native culture to dispel the stereotypes. And we want to give back to the community to let our peers know that this is a beautiful culture that the Native people have and that we can all benefit from it.
To understand that Native people are still here, to understand that a lot of us still support and honor our past, and we still continue to practice our culture.
So my hopes and plans for the future with this group is that it continues to grow, that younger families come in and start taking leadership roles in it.
We want just to educate that, that we're still here and there's still things that are concerning to our culture that we want other people to learn about and, hopefully gain some insight into.
So now we're going to see the second part of our double feature. Our Native American Student Alliance came to one of our NAPAC meetings, one of our monthly meetings, and they identified as a goal to increase the visibility of this leadership group. So as part of that, they just produced and finished this documentary, hot off the presses. Tuesday night, they had a red carpet event as part of their group gathering. So you're some of the first eyes to be able to see this video.
NASA stands for the Native American Student Alliance, where we welcome everyone into our club, Native American or not.
NASA is kind of a way for me to explore an aspect of my heritage that I don't necessarily have. But mainly, it's a way for me to try to get more representation and get a lot more focus on this massive aspect of culture that exists.
For me, NASA is a place to get to know my heritage more and get to know where I came from and the traditions that my tribe does and is connected to.
I needed a place where I felt safe. I wanted a place where I knew that even if I'm having a bad day, I can go to this club and be like, hey guys, I'm not in the best mood today. And everyone is like, yeah, we feel that. With NASA, it's a family. There's no one really to beat, and it's everyone just being who they are in their own club.
I found NASA through one of the Possibility Fair. Everyone who was at that booth was very excited to be there, and it was very fun to be around. I've always loved the culture and to learn. I just always wanted to learn more about the traditions. The NASA shirts, I got a free NASA shirt, so it was definitely a cool.
So it was a free t-shirt. That's why.
You learn a lot about Native American culture and tradition, and it's a really fun thing to partake in.
Honestly, I didn't know a lot about, I knew some stuff about my Native culture, just not a lot. Not a lot of our Native stuff been passed down, and this is just an opportunity to get our stuff passed down.
We all know it's not much in our educational, system and in our textbooks. We don't have a lot of chances to learn about it, and this group has given me more chances to learn than I have ever experienced in my life.
I didn't really know what Native American culture was. Of course, my mom talked about it and stuff, but we never really did anything. So when growing up, I'm like, yeah, I'm Native American. Everyone's like, that's cool. I'm like, but I really don't know what this means. I haven't learned my culture. I've learned everyone else's, but my own, because it's not talked about enough.
A lot of things told in history books and by teachers isn't always 100% true. It's mostly directed toward the violence and the wars and everything, and we don't really focus on the traditions and the community connectedness within the tribes and how big they are into family.
And I also think that there's kind of an important aspect about not just learning about it, also kind of being able to live through it by participating in, like, you know, traditional craft and getting to learn all these things because you kind of foster a deeper connection with it.
We have Blast Week at our school, which is like Be Loving and Sharing Together, and it's about like heritage and ethnicities coming together and like realizing these different ethnicities within our school. So we did a lot for that. We also went to a climate change conference where we got to sit in and watch just like them talk about the different changes and like helping the environment just overall, and that was really cool.
So on every single door for all the teachers' classrooms for Native American Heritage Month, we post like a true fact about like Native history or culture.
We distributed turquoise ribbons in order to raise awareness. I was surprised at how many people took quite a great interest in that. And it was very, very successful.
We also do beadwork. So you can wear it like on a everyday basis, or we have events such as the Heritage Fashion Show. You can wear it in like powwows or traditional events. It's like just traditional regalia you can wear.
All of us here like went rain tanning, and it was like the funnest time ever. Even if we all weren't like there skin in the hides, we were over there talking. So I think it's just the community that really brings us all together.
I think my self-identity has changed and the way I look at myself has, because growing up I knew that I was Native, but it wasn't like a traditional thing to do smudging around my house, to go to powwows, to do all these Native traditions of making clothing and everything. So I think like being part of this community made me realize like how many different traditions there are to this like group and ethnicity.
It is an alliance. It's not just for Native American students, it's for students who are willing to come and learn.
Yeah, there's no like one-upping factor. It's just we're all here to learn, we're all here to enjoy the community and all that we get to do.
Native American Student Alliance.
So you have all these amazing leaders in front of you. If you have any questions, now would be the time.
Hey, open the floor up for questions. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Director Porbenny.
Thank you. Thank you. That was great. I'd like to ask, for some of you that are just learning the culture newly, how has it been for you? I think there was someone there.
I am not Native, so I'm brand new to learning everything about Native culture and Native traditions. And I said this in the video, we don't have a lot of chances to really learn, you know, the cultures and the traditions and what actually happened other than, you know, what happened and the fighting that went on in our past. And our textbooks are really stuck on that. And for me to be able to work on beading and learn how they did that and skinning hides to make moccasins, it's super fun to learn, you know, the process, because we can't do that with machines now these days. You know, nothing can recreate that learning and that experience, and that's just been really eye-opening for me.
Thank you.
Either of you want to talk about identity and the impact of the group?
This group has made a lot of impact on me, I guess, just because getting into my culture a lot more, especially that my mom passed away 2 years ago, so she was like our last like family member that was Native American. My dad is like not, so being in this group really helps me find more of a community within like my own culture and make me realize that there's a lot more to the world, not just black and white, and it's made me like love my culture a lot more than I had before.
Yeah, I've grown up not living necessarily within like the, you know, cultural practices and activities of like indigenous peoples, and I think that kind of being able to, there is something very important about kind of having that like tangible, being like the activity in the community that you don't necessarily have through any sort of other educational experience. Like, I don't think anything could necessarily replicate what we have at NASA, because it's not just learning about the things, it's about being able to have this community of other people who are like, all have these kind of shared experiences, and also beyond that, also all learning things together. And I think that ultimately it's more about the togetherness of it that kind of brings that aspect that you don't have in like the educational versions.
Director Petrie?
I just want to thank you for coming tonight and showing us these 2 videotapes. They were just fabulous, both of them. It occurs to me that it must be a really empowering thing for you students, because not only are you learning about your heritage, but you're also then teaching your fellow students about that. And that must be a great experience. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that.
About the experience that.
Well, we did visit middle school, some of Stillwater and
Yeah, Stillwater and Oakland Middle School.
Oakland Middle School, and that was kind of an interesting experience because you have this kind of large base of students that they had kind of this, context where they were learning about like, Native Americans throughout their textbooks or like the following weeks, but I think there was something very interesting because what we did is we had set out all these tables in like the media center, and we had all of these like interactive objects, and students had to like guess the things, what they were, and like have to figure out their uses. And I think that a lot of questions and things are being asked, and there's something that is kind of interesting about seeing people kind of experience those sort of things for the first time, and not just like hear about them, but able to see and question and figure out. And beyond that, I think it's important because students, need to learn to kind of it needs to be something that students are used to and like normalized to an extent at a younger age, and it makes students more comfortable about exploring your background and exploring different heritages and different practices. And I think that being able to teach that to students has been a really great opportunity.
Yeah, and add on to that, especially in how Native American culture is taught in the school system, it does focus on the negative history, not so much the positive and traditions and stuff like that. So when we did go to those middle schools, it was us getting our message saying that there's more to us than wars. We're not all just going to be fighting each other for all of history. There's a lot more to the culture. And they were all super interested in it, and they're all, even the beadwork, they were like, this is super cool. And we're like, yes, and so we hope that we have more people when they come.
Dr. Hocker?
I'm fascinated by this whole alliance, both the parents and the students. I really am impressed with. You guys are living cultural history, kind of bridging, like I think in one of the videos they were talking about, kind of dispelling stereotypes of what has been traditionally taught in schools. And to have students who are Native coming to classrooms is just such a, or in that case, in the middle school, and being able to live your culture and just show that you're still here is really impressive. But my actual question goes back to the trunks that were mentioned in the first video. I'm really curious, where do these come from? How do you decide what kind of themes to do? Who uses them? That's fascinating. Yes?
So I can answer that. I'm Joanna Tom. I am the wife of James Tom. I'm also a member of Native American Parent Advisory Committee. So the trunks came about because we were going to the multicultural
Resource Center?
Resource Center, yeah, I'm like, I know it's like an LC or an RC, Multicultural Resource Center, and we kept like checking things out and borrowing them and bringing them into our classrooms, and we're like, well, why don't we just make our own? We have the experts within our community. We have elders from both Dakota and Ojibwe heritage who can guide us in this practice, and so NAPAC used some of the grant money that we get from the state to purchase items, and we have been using them like every single month at the high school with NASA. These guys, I mean, they just used some of the things. They wore the jingle dress that we have in the trunk for the fashion show. We set up a display during Native American Heritage Month in one of the main display cases at the high school. At the cultural fair for Blast Week on Friday, we're gonna have at least 3 tables where the students are gonna set things out and explain them to their peers. And, yep, they brought them to the middle schools and they used them there. And then also our elementary media specialists are going to be using items from the trunks for their lesson that they're doing, centered on 3 different books by Indigenous authors in March, right? March and later in the spring. So they're available, and I've been telling the teachers at the high school too, because I work at the high school too, in case I didn't say that yet. But so, you know, I've been telling teachers at the high school, like, hey, if you want to use this, you know, we have it available. You just reach out to, mostly, I'm kind of the point of contact for it right now, but NAPAC is in charge there, so.
Director Riley?
I'm curious. I've kind of been watching a little bit of some of the things you guys have been able to engage in and learn and practice, and it's really, really neat stuff. And it's actually at a time in our lives currently that it is becoming more needed, necessary, popular, you know, starting to become more self-sufficient. And I am curious, you know, what types of things you're teaching in practice, and how many of you kids actually bring this back and use it in practice in your lives? I mean, are you able to? Are you in space where you can do these things? Some of the things I'm watching, I'm like, I want to learn how to do that. And I'm sure many of our community do.
I mean, yeah, I can start. I mean, intend to at least going into horticulture or some sort of conservation, and I forage and I'm outside a lot. And I think that one thing that was very interesting was kind of the realization that these sort of practices and activities that I'm doing have all been kind of cyclical. And the fact that that was kind of, I don't know, that was kind of the first time that I realized that I had this kind of connection to my heritage that went beyond just something that I was kind of required to do, and that I'm kind of living on this pre-existing foundation of like, you know, culture, of like my own culture that has been existing. And I think that, yeah, no, it has been super applicable because it's something that really interests me. That's something I've been interested in my whole life. And learning, I took a medicine class with Paul Red Elk, and I've learned how to make baskets, and I've learned how to tan hides. And I think that all those things are things that I'm going to use for the rest of my life, or going to have interest in. So yeah, I would say that it's extremely applicable to, like, particularly what I'm learning.
And Mason also, over the summer, has planted and tended the Three Sisters garden that we do in partnership with Sally Manzera Interpretive Nature Center. So, and that's corn, squash, and beans.
Yeah.
And so kind of made Mason do that because that's his interest area. But definitely applicable to his future, so.
Yeah, I would love to come and hang out sometime if you guys are in doing some, you know, neat thing that isn't normal behavior as far as normal practice, living practice and styles. It's really intriguing to me, and I'd love to come and learn a little bit.
Well, every Monday and Thursday, C205, we're doing bead work.
We also have the graduation.
Oh, I've got it down on beads, let me tell you. That's up my alley.
So Mason said the graduation ceremony might be a better place.
Much more formal.
Yeah, all of our Board of Education members will be invited to that. It'd be wonderful to have you there.
Yes,
I was gonna say, I attended it last year, and it was the best experience, just watching everyone graduate, and just even the family that wasn't graduating. It was really, that ceremony was phenomenal. The music, it was great.
Yeah, I know we've been up here a while, but I do want to give voice to our media specialists because they have an exciting project that they did one last year, and now they're doing another one this year, so I wanted to give them quick voice if we could.
All right, well, I'm Natasha Toager. I am this year part-time between Anderson and Lake Elmo. And my trusty colleague here is Tanya Potter, and she is between Rutherford and Brookview. And so last year, many of you heard us talking about our work with Shad and Thua, and that was just life-changing for us as educators, for Shad and Thua, I think, but also for our students, our elementary students, kindergarten through 5th grade, all got this experience, and Shad and Thua were rock stars to them. We had a Zoom meeting with them. They did a video for us. This year, they followed up with another video for us to show our kids, and the kids were like, oh, it's Shad and Thua. So we haven't started yet our Native American lesson with all of our students, but we'll be doing that K-5. And one of the things that we want to do, and I think it was Sophia maybe that said in the video, that sometimes teachers don't say it the way it has happened in their experience. It's not our heritage at all. We don't want to be up talking for another person's heritage in front of all of our students and being that voice. So we really want to reach out to these students so that their voice comes in. And then also what's really fun is to get those little kids in our elementary school thinking about what can we do to be leaders when we get to the high school age, or what can we do even right now. Joanne had told us that there's a event coming up, a powwow with an author that we're using.
Oh, yeah, yep.
And so we will be inviting all of the elementary kids to be able to come to that event and see the actual jingle dress that we're talking about in some of our lessons. And like they said, we'll be using the trunks to be able to share those with our elementary kids. And hopefully maybe having a Zoom meeting with some of our high school students so that their faces can be recognized too and their voices heard authentically.
And then before we say farewell, we do have one final piece per Minnesota state statute. Our Native American Parent Advisory Committee actually does something called takes a vote of concurrence, which really talks about whether or not our Board of Education, our school district, our staff are working in good faith with those students and families. So I'm gonna ask our NAPAC chair to read the results of that vote of concurrence.
Alito, my name is James Tom. I'm an enrolled member of the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians and the chairperson of Stillwater Schools of Native American Parent Advisory Council. And tonight to share to the Stillwater School Board and the district are compliant with the Minnesota statutes of the American Indian students and the needs and the work. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you so much. Great job.
Annie, do you have another question?
Yeah, I wanted to
Yes.
quickly, I wanted to thank the parents, Thank the parents and all the media staff there for giving these children, our students a voice. Culturally, one thing about culture that a lot of people fail to realize is people can be dismissive when the term culture comes up, but that's who you are. It is all of you. It is your life. It is your future. It is what entails the human being that you are. Say, anyone without a culture is dead. That's the truth. You have it. And for your parents to be able to, and our media specialists to be able to provide you with that opportunity to re-identify, see who you are, and be able to present that to everyone is the best thing that can ever happen to you and to those who hear you. So thank you to the elders here, and of course to our media specialists as well. Thank you.
Well, and there was another question. I'm sorry. You're not allowed to leave yet.
Come on, we'll be here all night. We love it.
Director Kelsenberg.
I may have to meet with you afterwards on this item. I actually tried the Three Sisters gardening, and I failed miserably because I did not use, you gotta use climbing beans, okay? And they're hard to find, so I want to come to that session when you talk about that. And also, you talked about some middle schoolers. So you meet on Mondays and Thursdays. Can a middle schooler take the shuttle bus over and join you? And
So I did have one parent reach out to me at the beginning of the year, or towards the beginning of the year, and I did let that parent know that if their student wanted to come to the high school and participate in the programming we have there, that is perfectly fine, but that we couldn't provide any transportation, and that, I would include that family in future outreach, so we're trying to keep that going, but definitely if there are students who are, 7th, 8th grade, 6th grade who want to come over and try it. I mean, they're getting a little rowdy now at the high school, but.
I mean, administration could correct me on this, but I think you can take a shuttle bus from the middle school over to the high school for different activities. Correct me if I'm wrong.
available, yeah.
Great. Other questions or comments? This is just amazing work, and I love being able to hear how you're doing and what's going on. And so I appreciate you coming here. And like I said, I always look forward to the events I attend, and I'm sure the whole board wants to do that more too. So great.
Thank you all so much for the opportunity.
Okay, now we're going to move to report C, which is the review of the 2021-2022 general fund budget, and Dr. John Tyne on the television screen.
We're ready for you, John. Can you hear us?
Oh, now I can. I couldn't hear the board chair. I apologize for that. Good evening, board members and community.
Can you?
It's not plugged in.
Remind you that
Mike?
Director Tyne, can you hear us? Can he hear you?
Just 1 second. We're working on audio here in the room. No, you-
I was having a little trouble hearing the wonderful programming while it was going on. How am I doing?
Hold on 1 second.
Okey doke. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay. First of all, can the board chair and the rest of the board hear me?
We can. Can you hear us? No?
You're going to have trouble hearing them. Unfortunately, I think I can maybe read. But
That's okay. Yep.
We can hear you okay.
Okay, that's great. First of all, I'd like to apologize from the distant communication is sometimes a little bit rugged. First of all, the information that I'm going to give you, I'm going to try to make it as brief as possible, concise as possible, and also give you the information you need to make the right decisions. It was kind of interesting to listen to the program that came before us because a lot of times as the business office feels disconnected or removed from what happens in the classroom. And tonight really made it come alive for me and understand that the money that we're putting together and trying to present and use in our district really does affect kids teaching and learning at all levels of the organization. First of all, the timeline, I want to just touch base on that a little bit. Each year, the board adopts a budget in June of each year. And that budget is made on preliminary information. And it's revised during the year, and that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. I want you to know this would have taken place probably sooner. I would like to have the work start in October, finish it, and have it approved by probably January, early January. But you'll recall this year we had a referendum. We had a pretty complex audit because of the SR and COVID funds. And then we were surprised with additional COVID surprise. The Omni showed up in January and it kind of slowed things down a little bit. But we're moving ahead with the timeline. And as you can see, we've gone through January, we're into February, we're going through the presenting it to the budget folks. We are waiting for some budget revisions still to arrive at the business office. And I can give you an example of why that does take a little time. Take a look at your information tonight that you received. There's some changes in staffing, even at this late date for ESSER funds. And there were 3 people that were hired. Those have to all be accounted for if we're going to make this work and be successful. So we look to come to you as a board on March 3rd, the March 3rd meeting, and have a budget revision presented to you for approval. will go to the Finance and Ops meeting in late February to review the information also. I'd be happy to stand for any questions as we go, and you can feel free to just to interject those at any time. There's usually some guidelines that we use to establish the budget revisions. Revenue is based on enrollment, the levy, and other federal and state information. In June of this past year, we were not exactly sure where our enrollment was going to be. We projected somewhat low, and it looks like we're doing better in the enrollment area than we anticipated we would. Also, the referendum passed, but I want to remind the board and I want to remind the public that that money does not come this year. It comes in the next fiscal year, 2022-23. The revenue is going to be updated based on the most current information. And also remember, we're going to be continuing to get ESSER funds, and the ESSER expenditures have to occur before we receive the revenue, and they have to match. So at the end of the year, the revenue will match expenditures. And then we update the appropriation for special education and the formula allowance increase by 2.45%. So that has to enter into it. Expenditures include all employee benefits are updated, the CARES and ESSER expenditures. There's no change for allocations, and the rest of it, I think, is pretty clear, and you should be able to understand. Remember, when we put the budget together in June, we are not sure who's retiring, who's going to be here, who leaves to go to another job, etc. So a lot of those are best guess.
Is he still talking? He's frozen.
It'll come back.
We have the general fund object expenditures, and I'm getting to be unstable. Can you still hear me?
Now we can,
Okay.
but we missed a minute or two.
You are stable.
And please don't think that I'm unstable, but the internet is unstable. Okay, so comparing January 1st, 2021 to January 1st, 2022. The reason that I picked that is because that's halfway through the year. And a lot of times people think that the expenditures would be exactly at 50%. That's not the way that it works out in school districts because of the way we pay our employees and the way the school year runs. Our students are in school for approximately 9.
He's unstable.
Expenditures this year. We
Lost you there for a little bit, Jeff.
Okay, am I back?
You are back now, yep, but we missed
Okay.
the last few seconds of what you said.
What I'm saying is this is about half a year through. And so it shows in comparison where we were from one year to the next. You'll notice that the expenditures, which includes every salary, every check that's drawn on the district for the first 6 months, is about $21.9 million. Now that shows an increase over the previous year. There are a couple of reasons for that. One, stop and think about COVID, which caused us to have lots of changes in staffing substitutes, and also we're spending ESSER money, which we haven't spent previously or didn't budget because we didn't know where we were going to put it. The benefits probably give a more accurate information. Higher this year because that also includes, did I disappear again?
Just for a few seconds, yep.
Okay, and that also includes utilities. There's a big reduction in technology and supplies. That's because we spent a lot of ESSER money last year in the technology area, and of course this year we're not. Capital improvements show an increase because we have a better working conditions and school is in session. So there's this increase. And people have asked, what's the loan for? And the loan amount is really for the ECFE building that's over by the middle school. And that's the loan that you have on that piece of that facility right now. And then dues and other insurances are at the end. So we're really about right on. In fact, when you take a look at the total, we're spending less this year at the same time in object codes than we did in a previous year. Now there's another slice of this, and it's called the program, which would be the next slide up, so I don't want to bore you too much. But this slices it a different way. And you can see the first line is administration, and you'll notice that there's a significant decrease there. And one of the reasons is because we have one superintendent this year and not two. And also some other changes have been made in the administrative expenditures that lower it. When you take a look at the benefit, excuse me, not the benefits, I'm talking about the district support. That's a big decrease, and of course, that's where the technology expenditures were included. If you take a look at just the regular instruction, we're just about right on the money. We're spending just about exactly where we were at the same time last year. And what kind of encourages me is, remember, that was before we settled the 2-year contract. So this year is really based on similar amounts. So I'm feeling very positive about that. The rest of them are listed, and the difference between them is about $117,500. Now there's a couple of things that we need to consider as a district, and if you could go up just a little bit, Carissa. Things to consider are construction, COVID funding. Enrollment is the big thing for us. Enrollment and making sure that we have accurate enrollment, and we're going to talk about that later on. It really makes a difference. And in a previous year, we overestimated the revenue or the enrollment, and that really does make a big, big difference. Inflation right now is at 7.5%. So if you have inflation issues in your home budget, you can imagine when you spend the kind of money that we do, $114 to $16 million, it does make a big difference. 7% on $500,000 on $100 million is about $7 million. Negotiations have not finished yet, and staffing and utilities and subs, this is a real challenge for the district. And remember, we're going to have a technology grant here that is going to increase our expenditures, but we're going to be reimbursed for that. And our transportation contract, that's been kind of a struggle for us, and you heard that earlier tonight, and we're going to be dealing with it. Now, the last thing I just want to touch base with, and I thank you for bearing with me, is the revenue percentage. And as you can see, the revenue is in the general fund is about 31%. Food service is right around 50%, and that's about exactly where it should be. Community ed is around 50%, which I'm rather impressed with, and I think that's good work for Annette. Construction, that's just finishing up the construction bonds that was available, and it's used in playgrounds and across our district. Debt service is about at 50%. Health insurance, dental insurance, which we have a self-funding program. The OPEB trust, there was an interest reimbursement, so that's why there's a negative there. And the student activity is not paid until the end of the year. We record them, and then Lynn makes an adjusting entry. So what we're looking at is about 36%. You're probably asking, well, if we're halfway through, how come we only have 36% of our revenue? And you have to remember when you pay your taxes, you pay them twice a year, and the district gets a good portion of their revenue from property taxes. And the property taxes are paid in May and October. So we have the May one, but the May is coming, and May was earlier. October was paid this year, and May will be in
Does he know he's lost again, Chris?
He's there too, pretty
there
accurate
he is.
also.
We lost you there for a few seconds again, John.
Revenue is about where we thought they'd be, considering the levy, and that it has to be updated. And remember that the state pays 90%, and so they withhold 10%. So that's a reason that's a little bit behind, and they adjust it this summer. So, are there any questions? And I'm afraid to ask that because you'll probably say we can't hear you anyway, John.
No, we can hear you. I'll open the floor for questions. Director Petrie.
Thanks for that, John. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and I think that Carissa is going to
Okay. All right.
interpret.
So I know that we're in the first year of the biennium, and the increase from the legislature on the formula was 2.45%. When do we receive those funds?
Those funds are going to be coming right now. The state has them in, and they're going to be in the gristmill, so they'll be starting to show up. But you have to recall that they're based on estimates that we made and in enrollment. And
We want to hear this.
which we're going to be putting in the budget.
Last year, right after you were talking about the estimates we made based on enrollment.
Okay, right after the enrollment, we were conservative and we kept them rather low. It looks like they're going to be better, about 280 kids, which we will be talking about when we bring the total budget to you. So I'm encouraged by that. So our revenue is going to go up probably about overall about 2.6 to 2.7 in comparison to where it was. Now that doesn't sound like a lot of money, but you have to remember that's figured on $116 million. So that's well in excess of $3 million, or in excess of $3 million.
And if I can just follow up, so then does the state give us that money once or twice a year, or all in one lump sum? How does that money come in?
No, the state meters it out. It comes over each month. There's there's amount that they give. By statute, they only pay 90% in the current year, and then 10% is withheld. And then they make adjustments for enrollment and a couple of other things that enter into it. You have to remember, it's not just the per pupil unit that we receive. It's also other forms of revenue. There are many different options that are available. And I'm thinking, just think of OPEB. Think of, you just heard one on the American Indian program. It's our Native American. That's not a huge amount, but I just saw a sheet go through where Eric was granted a grant for $38,000. All that enters into the gristmill, and the state meters that out over a period of time. Some you have to apply for, and they have to be approved. Other, it's metered out over the course of the year. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Or did you lose me?
She said thank you.
Oh,
Other
you're
questions?
entirely welcome.
Other questions? Okay, John, thank you.
Is everybody, are they awake there?
I think that's all we need. Thanks, John.
I appreciate your time. Thank you for being so patient with me. I apologize. It will be fixed the next time we visit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. We are moving on to item D with Mark Drummerhausen, and he's here to revisit ALC information with us.
Good evening, Chair Sherman, members of the board. Tonight, I'm here to update the draft of the ALC spaces at the Oak Park Learning Center. As you recall, we brought programming for Oak Park Learning Center back in December about the transitions program and our ALC program moving to Oak Park or staying at Oak Park and remodeling spaces to accommodate those programs. At a January board meeting, it was requested to go get more details around the ALC spaces, which we have done, and we've met with the ALC staff, and they've also got student feedback, and we're here tonight to prepare an updated version of those spaces. So just to recap, the Oak Park Learning Center is to create a center for learning, collaboration, and community within our Oak Park building. So far the board has approved this summer creating Home for the Bridge Transitions 18 to 21. It currently resides here at Oak Park, but it's creating spaces designed uniquely for those students and the programming that takes place within the Transitions program. The next step is to design an inviting alternative program for our ALC students, which we'll be talking about tonight, and also developing a welcoming learning spaces for our community as well. So just to recap, looking at the building which we're in right now, the north rectangle there in red is currently where the Transitions is right now, and the construction that will take place beginning at the end of the summer this fall, which I'll get into a timeline here in a second, for our phase 1. Which was approved on January 6th. Then phase 2, which we're talking about here this evening, is the south rectangle, the red one on the bottom, for the ALC and our shared spaces, which would, pending board approval, start construction the spring/summer of 2023. So this was presented before, the kind of the phased approach. If you look at the top of the screen with the tan, that is the Transitions programming that will be under construction here in the next few months. And then the green will be the ALC spaces as well as the shared spaces, which will be part of phase 2. So part of getting more information was to go out to our user groups. And what user groups are is the administration and staff of the ALC, as well as the staff also surveyed their students as well to see what type of learning spaces and things they would like to see within their upgraded spaces here in the Oak Park building. So this is just kind of a summary of the user groups and kind of the things that they came up with, is wanting flexible spaces that they could be used for a variety of purposes, common spaces for gathering and large projects and collaboration, spaces to accommodate hands-on learning, shared building resources to maximize opportunities, outdoor spaces, and then also opportunities for physical activity. So as you look at the screen here on the left, this was kind of the draft as we moved into it. So this is basically the way the spaces look today, and it was just sprucing them up a little bit within the individual classrooms. And you can see the designated walls there within the blue spaces. After meeting with our user groups and looking at more collaborative, flexible spaces, you can see the updated version on the right. If you look at the dots, when you see the dots represent individual students. So I believe there's about 86 students here that this could accommodate with the individual dots there within the new image. You also see green and blue spaces. Those are classroom spaces, but they're designated a little different. So if you look at the blue spaces are individual classrooms. So there may be some glass walls there or operable walls, but there's classrooms that have 4 walls with them. You see 2 on the bottom and then 1 there on the right. So there's 3 on the bottom. In the upper right-hand corner, the green represents classrooms, but it's also flexible / collaborative spaces that is classroom sized, but it may have 3 walls or ability to open up into a larger gathering space. So that's the differentiation between the blue and the green. So if I want to start in the upper right-hand corner, in the green area, you kind of see that dark green with the squiggly line. So it's kind of a classroom. That squiggly line represents an operable wall where they can open it up and have some flex space, or they could close it and have an individual size classroom. Right below that is a classroom space right below that, but that'd be a flexible, large group kind of gathering space or more open classroom. You'll notice the entryway is in the middle of the space. So if you look before on the left, the entryway is on the bottom. We're proposing to move the entryway to the middle of the space for supervision purposes throughout all the ALC areas, moving the entryway a little bit farther north. Just south of the entryway is our reception area with principal office and some conference room area. And then you'll see 3 individual classrooms, which are those blue spaces there on the bottom. On the left, the dark gray is the stairs to go upstairs. Then it's the peach color is the staff offices. And then there's a small group room, which I'll call maroon, and then some restrooms and individual restroom areas there, and that gray space is in between the maroon areas. One other thing you'll notice is there is additional square footage and a footprint is enlarged in this area. So if you look on the left, you'll see the upper left-hand corner of the previous space was not included in the ALC, and this version and this draft it is. And then you'll also notice that some of the walls and individual classrooms are not so much defined in the new space, but there's walls that were taken down and moved to make more collaborative spaces and a more free-flowing ALC space for our students. So now with that said, now we look onto the budget area. And looking at the transitions, which is already approved at 3.8 million. Now looking at the ALC and shared spaces. So I kind of went over the ALC spaces just now. The shared spaces is updating the gymnasium, the kitchen, the cafeteria, as well as the south parking lot. The shared spaces stay the same, but we do have about a $300,000 increase from where we were in January to now. And the reason for that is removing walls to create more flexible learning and collaborative spaces for our students. The additional square footage, which I pointed out in the updated drawing for our ALC students, and then moving the entryway and that vestibule farther north. So that kind of accounts for the reason and kind of getting more information from our students and more information from our staff about how to create a welcoming, inviting, and an optimal learning space for our ALC students. The second part of this is our funding sources. So you will see that the phase 1 stays the same. Phase 2 in red moves up from 3.2 to 3.5 million, but the funding sources and the dollar amounts next to the funding sources stay the same. And so because there are ranges before, that increase is within the funding sources that were previously allocated for our ALC project back when it was presented back in December and early January. So with that, just want to talk a little bit timeline now of where we are. So today is bringing a report here to the board. We would be looking to bring this for an action item at our next board meeting on March 3rd. And then if it is approved on March 3rd, then we start to go through our design and bidding process. So you can get a sense of the timeline got moved back a little bit just from where we are. So if it get approved March 3rd, we're looking at about 5 months to design and then create the bidding documents. So that takes us kind of March through July. And then in August is our bidding and bid opening. So the bids are out on the streets at the beginning part of August. We'll open up the bids at the end of August. And then September and October will be our permits. It'll be city permits, there'll be county permits, state permits, watershed, et cetera, getting all those sorts of permitting in place. So we're looking at construction starting around November 1st or the beginning of November. And then that will take probably around 4 months, November, December, January, February. So we'll be looking at the transitions moving in around March 1st. And then at that point, we would be looking at, after March 1st, then starting around March, April, and starting to look at the transitions, or excuse me, the ALC spaces and start our construction of the ALC spaces kind of March through July, early August-ish. And then that includes ALC spaces as well as the shared spaces with the kitchen, the cafeteria, the gymnasium, and the parking lot, and those sorts of things to be done in early August of 2023 for both the ALC, or for the ALC project and the shared spaces, and the transitions would be done March of 2023. So with that, I will open it up to any questions that you may have.
Director Riley.
How many classrooms does the ALC currently have in the high school?
I believe there's 5. 5 classroom spaces. I think one of them is broken into individual office. There's some office and some small group rooms, but I believe there's 5 classrooms dedicated to that. I can double check it, but off the top of my head, I believe that's what they have.
So this is relatively the same?
Yes. It's a bigger square footage with that, as you include the hallway and kind of the left side with some of the flex rooms and small group rooms and staff offices and those sorts of things. So classrooms wise, yes, but it's the footprint is bigger than what they currently have.
Thank you.
Director Helzenberg, and then we'll go to
Sure.
Director Hager.
What would we be approving next meeting? The whole package of the dollars, the design, and the dates are kind of separate approvals for different things?
So Phase 1 has already been approved, the 3.8 million. We'd be looking at approving Phase 2 of the ALC and shared spaces. And then kind of, I laid out a timeline that's just kind of as we sit here today. Hopefully can stick through that, but just depending on where we go, so it's more approving Phase 2, the dollar amount, and approving the ALC project to be completed. And that's kind of the timeline that we're working on right now.
Director Hockert?
Thank you. I remember in the presentation the last time we talked about the ALC kind of having around 80 or so, or capacity for 80. I don't remember exactly what the numbers are. But does this space, and Director Riley was kind of alluding to this as well, does this space give us an opportunity to expand the program at all? Because there seemed to be a desire to maybe get more kids into this program. How many kids would be accommodated in this space, and is there an opportunity to expand if we would have more interest?
So twofold. First off, there's about 60 to 65 kids in the ALC currently, and there's about 40 to 50 attend on any given day based on their schedules. So if you look at the current dots there, there's around 85, 86 or so there. So it does account for everybody there, as well as some growth within the program. If the program were to grow and double in size, we could look at this footprint and replicating it here on the bottom floor and replicating this same footprint here on the upper floor. Obviously, you won't have an entryway there on the upper floor, and we'd kind of, move the little things around, but we could, if our program doubled and really drew students into our district, we could add on spaces here within Oak Park.
Director Petrie?
So are there just two phases to this? The first being transitions and the second being the ALC?
Yes, the ALC and the shared spaces.
Okay,
Yep,
so that's
together.
my question then. Can you talk a little bit more about this, the shared spaces? Are we still going to have that community learning space? Can you talk a little bit more about that piece of it?
Yes, there still will be community learning. We have not met with our community ed folks to see what programming needs that they're looking for as well. So they would have current areas right there for them to use.
And so does that mean that the cost might go up depending on what their needs are or what they decide they might want in that space?
Right now, we have the ALC, and maybe you can talk more about the community needs, but right now we
I
have
can just jump in for just a moment. If this is approved tonight, then we would like to go back to our leadership team and look at the upper part that's in white. And this would be down the road, but we would really like to see what type of programming we want to provide out of this building. At this time, we do have our teaching and learning department has storage here. We have professional development opportunities here. We might look at our technology department as well. So we need to make some decisions, and we need to look at our strategic plan that we're updating and setting priorities to see what possibilities could be provided here. We're also looking at some community connections that might be able to benefit our transitions program as well. And we'll be looking at possibilities. But this is long-term down the road and in a while. Right now, we just want to focus on our transitions and our ALC and leave other possibilities open.
I guess I was referring to just that green space that you have
Oh,
there that
yes,
says, and so what is going to be there, if anything?
So
Go ahead.
the green space on this slide here.
Yeah.
So looking at the top one and the rectangle in the gym, there's some fire suppression, some things that need to be done in the gym area. The upper left is the kitchen and the cafeteria. Currently, all of our kitchen, oven, stove, fridge, those sorts of things currently need to be upgraded, and a lot of it's gone. We've used that in other buildings. So there's currently nothing in our kitchen areas. We need to upgrade that, as well as cafeteria supplies, since we'll be serving breakfast and lunch out of this area for both ALC and transition. So it's all those equipment for the kitchen and the cafeteria. And then it's the parking lot in the south end of the building for ALC students. If I go back here, you can kind of see below the bottom rectangle there, that parking lot currently does not exist, so it'd be adding that parking lot to the site.
Okay. And I see a space here that says community learning space. Is that just a big old room? What is that exactly?
So that's actually 2 rooms right now that would be dedicated for community learning. So those are 2 classrooms right there that they can use to rent out for programming that they see fit from their needs.
Okay, but no need to do much of anything to that space right now.
We're not planning.
And if we are updating the gymnasium and the kitchen and the community space, we will be working with Annette Solomon, our Director of Community Ed. And gym right now, that is just a wonderful commodity to have for community use. And I don't know if you've heard how much our PAC is being used right now, and pickleball, other sports. We need more space for that to be able to offer to our community at a later date. And that would be during the time when the transitions in the ALC are not using those spaces. So we could be providing community ed classes and other programming out of those spaces after school.
Actually, just a new question. As I look at the new ALC space that you are creating, I mean, it's essentially across the main hallway from where we sit right now in this space. So is there going to be entryways on the other side of the hallway from here to get into the new ALC space? Or is the only entry going to be that east entryway?
So there'd be an entryway from outside, which you can see the entry right here pointing in. And then the top on the right-hand side, if you look at the tan colored, right where the cursor is, there's going to be double doors or an entryway from the main office area into that space. But there will be doors there separating that space from the community space as well.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, questions? Director Kelsenberg?
So the transitions, which is already here, they'll just have the better space, when this is done. But ALC would then move in here the fall of '23, right?
Correct.
So actually, another bonus there is then that frees up that space at the high school, right? That's 5 more rooms that those teachers would have? Okay.
And at the beginning of next year, the transitions will kind of move over to the ALC spaces while theirs is being constructed. And then once theirs is done, they'll move back.
Other questions? So we're not voting on this tonight. This is just report. We'll vote on it at the next meeting. My question is, I know it's within the scope of the budget to move ALC here, and I appreciate, can you just maybe talk a little bit about what was added that led to I know when you first came to us, it was kind of an idea, then it became a concept. So it doesn't surprise me that the cost went up a little bit, but is there anything that you can maybe talk about that led to that increase, that slight increase?
So there's kind of three big ticket items. The first one is, if you look on the left drawing, there's kind of 5 fixed classrooms, where on the right, there's a lot of collaborative, open learning spaces, as well as some flexible and glass walls. You can kind of see the dotted line would be some glass areas for supervision and collaboration. So it's removing walls and taking walls down as part of that and creating open collaborative spaces. The second part of it is increasing the square footage. If you look in the upper left-hand corner, that we're incorporating that space in the new area, where in the old drawing we did not, so it's added square footage. And then as well as moving the entry or the vestibule from the bottom of the space more towards the middle of the ALC space. So those 3 things are kind of the reason why that price increased the way it did.
Okay. And I do like that there's room to grow the program. I think we'd love to fill it up and grow it even more, but I think it does give us a nice amount of growth potential in there, so, great. All right, seeing no more questions, we'll move on. Thank you, Mark, very much. We'll move into our policy discussions. Item E, second policy reading 205, open and closed meetings. Dr. Cherry.
Thank you, Chair Sherman. Board directors and Superintendent Lansfeld have a couple of policies here to bring before the board this evening. The first of such is the second reading of open and closed meetings, and this is a second reading. Last time At our last meeting, you learned a little bit about the purpose and some of the updates that are being proposed. Again, this policy was originally adopted in 2018. There is a 2-year review cycle, and so we have made just some minor proposed changes, and thinking that's very reflective of the current times. If there are any questions or any comments from any board directors or the community, we welcome that. But again, we haven't had any updates or any suggestions since the first reading.
Great. Are there any questions on this policy? Okay. And again, still open to send feedback, so if you take a look at it and see something else, just send it to the committee. All right, the next item is another policy, second reading, policy 722, public data request, and we go back to Dr. Cherry.
Okay, 722.
214. Oh, 214. We missed
Okay.
one. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed one. 214 is first, out-of-state travel by board members.
Thank you.
Still you.
Chair Sherman, okay, another one. This is a second reading. We were here at our last meeting talking about out-of-state travel by board members. Again, this is a policy that was originally adopted in 2018. There is a 2-year review cycle. Again, minor changes that are being proposed. The purpose of this is specifically in relation to out-of-state travel. Occasionally, that might be appropriate for board members, and so this is a policy on how to fulfill that obligation. And we have not received any comments or feedback or questions since the first reading. We would welcome that from board directors and from the community. And the plan would be that we would come back to our next meeting for possible approval, pending any additional comments that we might receive.
Any questions on the travel policy? Okay, seeing none now, we'll move to policy 722, public data requests, and back to Dr. Cherry.
Absolutely. So this is another policy that's coming before the board as a second reading. This is our policy that relates to our school district's responsibility relative to the collection, maintenance, and dissemination of public data. We follow state statute, and that's the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act, and are required to comply with our responsibility to maintain data, and also understanding our responsibility also to protect private data as well. And so with this, we have some proposals to make sure that we have some clear definitions that are brought up towards the top end of the policy here. So that makes it very clear of what is public data. It's all government data collected, created, received, maintained, or disseminated by the school district, unless that information is classified by state statute as either non-public or protected non-public data, or it is identified as private or confidential data. And then we have some guidance around how we handle requests for public data. And we are responding to data requests. We are held to a reasonable time frame in order to respond to those requests for public data. That response time can be affected by the complexity of the request, a particular request. If we have multiple requests, they're all coming through at the same time. And also then if the request also might pertain to protecting any kind of private data, confidential data, we may need to do some redactions of information, and so that also takes some additional time. But all of that is addressed. Our data practices designee is our HR director, and our HR director also has an HR assistant that do facilitate the requests. Our responsible authority, of course, is our superintendent, but those are the staff members within the school district that work on these types of requests.
We take our responsibility of protecting private data very seriously. We work with our legal counsel to ensure that any of the data requests that we fulfill are also meeting our obligations to provide that private information and private data. And so we also work with outside legal counsel when necessary on some of these requests. Our policy also, according to Minnesota Government Data Practices Act, also lays out some of the procedural aspects of if costs are incurred, when those costs may be passed along to the requester of information if it is for summary data. And then one update that we did bring based on response and some feedback that we received is some more clarification around the procedures. And so you'll notice attached to the policy is also a form. This is a public data request form, and it helps the requester identify the information that we need in order to fulfill the request. And with this, we intend to put this form online on our website to make it more accessible to the public, and also to help streamline the process just a bit. And so at this time, this is a second reading. We invite additional feedback, additional questions and comments, both from the board directors as well as the community. But our intent would be to take that feedback under advisement and possibly bring this policy back for a final reading at our next board meeting.
Okay. Are there questions?
Yeah.
Director Halzenberg.
Maybe I could have asked this a lot earlier in the process. So a lot of this is really driven by law. And is that more that state or federal law or some other?
So we follow the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act, and so it's state law.
Okay.
Director Hocker.
Thank you. One thing I wanted to kind of refresh our memories on, we went back to, or the first reading of this was back in November, and this was a policy that we did get a decent amount of feedback on. It's now February, and we're just bringing it back for our second reading. And we did spend quite a bit of time looking into a lot of the comments and questions, both from board members and from community members. And after lots of discussion, the policy committee has landed on pretty much keeping the model policy the way it is. Just to kind of explain the origin, there was more information in our original policy that we have opted to take out in order to better align with what is required in the law. So that's the main change that we made back in November. And then that additional procedural piece is what Director Cherry was just mentioning as well, that we have added, and that was in response to board member comments as well. From the community, we did hear kind of multiple comments as well, both in wanting to make these data requests as convenient as possible for our community, and then in addition to that, being very concerned about the costs of the data requests that were coming through. After our first reading, it was brought to our attention that we were incurring quite a bit of legal fees for some of our data requests. So there has been some concern that community members may not know when they ask for data requests how much it actually is costing the district at the beginning of their request. And there are basically two types of requests that can come through, just straight data and summary data. And according to the law, we are only allowed to charge for that summary data. The law is very explicit on what the district can and cannot charge for. So after integrating a lot of feedback, we kind of landed right back on the model policy itself, because that does follow the law very closely. And then we just added that procedural piece as well. And just if community members are interested in how much their data requests are going to be costing the district, that is, you can also request that if you're curious. So just wanted to give everybody an update of all the work that has gone into this policy since November.
Okay. Director Riley.
Thanks, I appreciate that, Katie. I do have a question on the redaction pieces of data requests that are made, some of them are heavily redacted. What is the process for supplying the requester the reasoning or the why as to why the information? I know that I have never seen, and I've utilized this as a taxpayer as well before I was on the board. And I mean, I even struggle getting the information now on the board. And I'm just curious as to what the process is on, and if there is one, or if it is practice of informing the requester about redactions.
So is your question how much?
How do you do that? I have never seen a redaction log, like when
got it,
things are
the redaction log.
redacted. I know our statute doesn't specifically say redaction log, but you are supposed to supply reasoning for the redaction.
So we looked into that because that was one of your questions. And according to the Minnesota state statute, it is not required by our state statute to include that redaction log. The only thing that we need to require, that we would need to explain is if we need to not give that data, the whole, basically reject the whole
Right, that's what I would just say.
data request.
So what process do you have if somebody gets something that's very blacked out to explain why that is?
You're not required to.
Maybe I'm not fully understanding your question. You're wondering, like, versus how do we decide when to redact versus when to reject? Is that your question?
Your reason to, I've never seen it supplied a reason for the redactions.
That is not required by Minnesota law.
The log isn't, but the reason is.
I was
The
just a community
redaction?
member. The lawyer always provided a reason.
Okay, now I'm getting confused.
Well, it's our legal department goes through and redacts everything, so they would be following the Minnesota data practices laws. They don't provide the feedback, but they are following the law.
The reason, if a constituent asks the reason, that is to be provided. I'm wondering what the process is, if there is something in place to handle that.
Maybe I can try. So when we have a data request, and it might include pieces of private information, private data, our legal team would review that and make the decision. If private data would be revealed, then that information is redacted. That piece of whatever document or artifact, that piece of it would be redacted. That's a decision that's made by our legal team. But there is not a log that is required for each individual redaction. There is a justification if a data request is denied, then we must provide a reason of why the data request is denied, but not specific redactions within a data request.
So you're not required to provide the reason, but if you are not giving that information that is requested, that is a denial. So that, I guess I would like a little clarity if somebody could follow up on that. Could you do that for me before we go into the next reading?
For the next reading?
Yeah.
What would you like me to look up exactly?
I would like to understand, and maybe you can talk to legal about that, the process of when redactions are held. I know we don't require a log because it's state, not federal. But the reasoning, if it is asked, the reasoning that the information was withheld, not the data request, but when you're withholding information on the data request, you're still withholding information. So I want that piece clarified. If you want to talk about it a little bit afterwards, so I can.
Maybe.
Okay.
That might be helpful. Thank you, Director Eiley.
Director Porbeni.
Thank you, Chair Sherman. Like you rightly said, Dr. Cherry, there is no law to justify redaction. Specifically, why we redact is due to confidentiality. You have private information in any data, you have to redact. You don't have, and there's no justification for you to give reasons as to why. When you request documents, the provider with that document, it's not a denial. But to protect the rights of those within that particular document with respect to confidentiality, you have to redact. That's the law. But to justify why you do that, There's none. You don't have to. But if you deny someone a request and you want to give reasons as to why you did, but not for redacting, there's no part of the law that says you have to give reasons as to why you're redacting that information.
I had a question really quick on the requester form. So how will that work for the community? They print it out, they fill it out? I'm just worried, you want accessibility, so could they pick up this form in the office at Central Services? I'm assuming they would fill it out and then either bring it in or scan it and email it in, but it wasn't really clear on the form itself, email it to the humanresources@stillwaterschools.org or drop it off, maybe just to have something on there?
Our intention actually was to make it an online form
Oh,
available
perfect.
on our website.
Okay, perfect.
But what you just mentioned is really a good secondary point, is to make sure that it's available in print form as well.
Yeah, like something about a document if you did, in Central Services or. And then I had brought up some formatting questions that probably, Katie, that just to look at those.
Yep.
Great. All right. Any other questions? Okay, moving on to item H, first policy reading, 414, and mandated reporting of child neglect or physical or sexual abuse. Dr. Jennifer Cherry.
Thank you, Chair Sherman. This is a first read for policy 414. This is a policy regarding our responsibility of being a mandated reporter and reporting child neglect or physical or sexual abuse. This is a policy that we are required to review annually, and we are proposing some fairly significant changes to the current policy that we have in place. The current policy is a little bit old. It was adopted in 2001, and there have been some legal requirements that have changed since that time. So I'm very happy that we're bringing this to the board for an update. Again, the purpose of this policy is to make sure that the statutory requirements of our school personnel are in place to report the suspected child neglect or physical or sexual abuse, and that we fulfill that legal obligation. And so with this, you'll see that we have incorporated a section on definitions, and this follows very clearly in alignment with our state statute, as well as reporting procedures, and then investigation and maintenance of school records, and the dissemination of this policy and the required training for this policy shall appear in our school handbooks, and also our annual staff training to ensure that we're in compliance with our mandated reporter law. And we welcome any feedback from both board directors and the community. And at this time, we're very, very excited to move forward with an update to this policy. So with that, we'll welcome any questions, comments, or concerns.
I'll open it up to the board. Questions?
One question.
Yeah.
So a lot of the changes, what's driving the changes? Is it laws, new laws, or feedback from our community?
So we've had updates to our mandated reporting laws since 2001. So we're a little bit behind in moving forward with the policy updates that reflect that. I would say everything that's currently being proposed in this policy update is already in practice in our school district. So although our policy language is a little old, our practices are in alignment with the current statute.
Director Hockert.
One other maybe addition to this policy, or note about this policy, at the very end it talks about how we as a school district inform our staff of this policy, because if you read through it, it's pretty intense. There's a lot of stuff in here. And how do we ensure that our staff understands their responsibilities? And it is in the handbook, and then I asked our human resources director, and she explained that the staff also gets to take a little quiz and has to pass the quiz each year so that they are able to understand and demonstrate understanding of their responsibilities as mandated reporters.
Any other questions? Significant updates, so thank you for bringing it past 2001. Okay, that's really nice to have that updated. Okay, and now moving on to item I, which is our first policy reading, policy 415, mandated reporting of maltreatment of vulnerable adults. Dr. Jennifer Cherry.
Thank you, Board Directors, Chair Sherman. This is a brand-new policy being proposed for our school district. Policy 415, mandated reporting of maltreatment of vulnerable adults, is a policy that we do not currently have in place in our school district. This is something that we are proposing that we have in place to comply again with state statute. We do serve vulnerable adults. We do have vulnerable adults that we work with in our system, and we want to make sure that we are protecting our vulnerable adults and ensuring that we are in compliance with that state statute. So similar to the last policy that we just proposed on mandated reporting of our children, this also follows along with our obligations to report any type of suspected abuse or neglect. And this also is something that our school district should be reviewing annually. And so you'll see here that the proposed review cycle or review frequency would be an annual review. Again, this policy includes definitions as well as information on investigation, and this would be an update to our current annual training on our required policies, and would be something new that our school district would be required to include. And with that, this is a first reading, and we would encourage any feedback, any comments from both board directors and from the community. Our intention would be to come back at our next business meeting for a second reading.
Great. Any questions? Director Kelsenberg.
Sure. When a child has their 18th birthday in the middle of the year, are they all of a sudden an adult by this definition, or do they fit some other student definition, or both?
They would fit under this definition, and it is anyone over the age of 18.
So that would be, most of this would apply to our 18-year-old high school seniors for the most part, right?
This actually would be applicable to all of the students in our transitions program.
Oh, sure, okay.
Any other questions? Okay, and again, feedback, welcome to both Director Hockert and Dr. Cherry. Great. Okay, next item of business is an adjournment to a closed session. I motion that the meeting now be closed for negotiations pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.03B. The governing body of a public employer may, by a majority vote in a public meeting, decide to hold a closed meeting to consider strategy for labor negotiations, including negotiation strategies or developments or discussion and review of labor negotiation proposals conducted pursuant to sections 179A.01 to 179A.25. Can I get a second?
A second.
Director Hockert? All in favor of adjourning to a closed session, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, we will now move into a closed session.